Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Rosh Hashanah, Perek Gimel, chapter 3. Okay, Perek Gimel, chapter 3, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. Okay. Shofar shanistak, a shofar that's split. The dipka, and you glued it back together, puzzle's invalid. That means like this. This is how the way the Bartanur explains this part of the Mishnah. If a shofar is split lengthwise into two separate pieces, lengthwise, got the shofar and just kind of split along the length, split in two.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you take some crazy glue, right? Of course, not a yontif. And you take some crazy glue and you glue it back together and you blow and everything seems to be fine. Puzzle, it is invalid because as the Gemara says, even though you glued it back together and it seems to be one, that we look at it as two shofars. We don't look at it as one. It's two shofars. And the Torah tells us that we are supposed to blow from one shofar, not from two. That's why, even though you glued it back together, the halacha is it's still puzzle. Next case. Dibek shivrei shofaros puzzle. In this case, what happened is that the shofar split in one or more places across its width, forming separate ring-like pieces. Okay, so you imagine you have along the width of the shofar, it's split, and you have like a bunch of different, you have a couple of pieces. And there again, dibek shivrei shofaros, you glued it back together. Puzzle. It's still invalid for the same reason that we said before. Now, it's interesting to note that the Bartanura says that in this case, if let's say, let's say it's split along it's split along the width, right? Maybe even after part of it splits off, maybe it could still be kosher. I can blow from it, maybe it still be kosher. So the way the Bartanura says is that if you can hold on to it, if you can hold on to what's left, right? And he says, and you can see the ends of it. I mean, you're holding it in your hands, but from each side, you can see some of the shofar coming out, kosher. So it's so there. We're not gluing anything back together again. It could be kosher. But if it broke into that many pieces, you have to glue it back together. We say puzzle. It's invalid. Next case. Nikav, it developed a hole. Ustamai, and you closed it up. Puzzle, if it impedes the blowing, it's invalid. Vimlav kosher, otherwise it's kosher. Now what it means is like this. What that means is that number one, this hole, how big is this hole? How big can this hole be? So we say number one is the hole is smaller than the intact part of the shofar. That means that the hole is less than half of the shofar. It's going to be a pretty big hole, but it's less than half of the shofar. Okay. It means, depending on how big your shofar is, but that's number one. It has to be less. It has to be that you have more of the intact part of the shofar than the hole. Then it says you closed it up. What do you close it up with? Shofar material. It has to be shofar. It has to come from a horn of the ram, right? It has to be stopped up with what would be shofar material.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you take a piece and you wedge it in, or in this case, maybe even glue it in. You're closing it up. Yeah. You don't forget the shofar is still intact. It has a hole. So we don't see it as we don't have it where we have two shofars here. It's not two shofars, it's a hole. Right. So now if you want to close up the hole, you close it up. I didn't see anywhere it can't be glue. I mean, how else are you going to do it? Just wedge it in? I mean, maybe, but it seems like you could glue it. And the bottom and the end of the day is what matters is that now, what does this shofar sound like? Does it sound like it originally sounded? Then you're okay. Yeah. If it doesn't sound like what you originally sounded, that's not okay. Right. So you need three conditions as they bring down here in the notes. Number one, the hole is smaller than the intact part of the shofar. Number two, the hole is plugged with shofar material. And number three, the repaired hole does not impede the sound. That is, the sound of the repaired shofar is the same as that of the original shofar before the hole was made. Clearly, when you have a hole, right, it's going to sound, there's going to be something different there. But the
shofar.
question is, what'd you say? Holy, what? It's a holy
shofar.
Holy shofar. So if after you plug up the hole, meaning basically, what is it? How much does this hole affect? If at the end when you plug it up, it still sounds like it was before, it's good. Otherwise, it's invalid. Even though you plugged it up with shofar material, the hole is small enough. At the end of the day, it's got to sound like it sounded like before. If not, it's invalid. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos.
We had a case with a chauffeur was